My joy in audit was I got to just poke around other people's businesses, understand how they work, why they work, what keeps people awake at night, who gets to survive the morning after and who doesn't. What it did give me, though, is an ability to interrogate what makes businesses tick.
I think most importantly on this journey has been the fact that it is inseparable. And when you look at where I am today and how it intersects with everything that I've done, I think it's just something that has now created what would be a multiplier. If you weren't online, you were not participating in your civil rights that you have, constitutional right. We need to rethink the way the system works.
Welcome to the Corner Office, where we bring you the latest news from the world of commercial real estate, the greatest voices in the industry, and the corporate chats you've been missing. Let's get to it.
Nyari, welcome to the studio, the former CEO of WeThinkCode. So I'm really excited to chat to you because obviously you started out as an accountant and now you've branched into tech. Now you've handed over the reins more recently. So there's quite a bit of a story there, and we just want to chat about the success of the business and also just sort of where it came from. I mean, typically, you go into accounting. Most accountants tend to stay in accounting. You've got into IT. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, thanks for having me. I guess the way I would talk about how I got into and why I stayed in accounting is probably the explanation for why I left, which is I was in audit specifically. And my joy in audit was I got to just poke around other people's businesses, understand how they work, why they work, how they tick, what keeps people awake at night, and who gets to survive the morning after and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And so that was the joy of it for me. And accounting itself is a language then of business. So I'd say my first language was accounting and the second one is IT. But at the core of it was always how business runs and how business works. And yeah, that was the passion. And so accounting gave me that opportunity. 11 years in is when I felt like I'm tired of coming when other cool people have come up with ideas and figured them out. And I was an auditor specifically. So I wasn't even in the engine room of strategy from finance. And I wanted to...
And audit's a heavy lifting. It's going in there, you kind of like going through everything, make sure everything checks and balances.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I would take advantage of every opportunity. If I was on a farm, I was going out there. I wanted to understand how sugarcane grew.
Yeah.
If I was in a hotel, I was bouncing around trying to understand everything from soap to hospitality. Yeah, so that was an interesting part of it, but wasn't really the core of my job. What it did give me, though, is an ability to interrogate what makes businesses tick. And then the next itch became, well, can I be part of creating and building product, not just coming and measuring financial value at the end of it? And so, yeah, that was the itch. 11 years into that accounting career, I decided to switch over and tumbled down in ranks from...
But it's not interesting that you go into this business because effectively you've looked at all these business models. You've looked at hotels and farms and all of these, producers and whatever other business model you've looked at. Yeah. And you decide to go for an incubator and a tech build-out business. That's quite a specific business and not necessarily widely available to go and interrogate in South Africa. Certainly, I mean, where do you start to even understand how to start to put this together? So was there someone that you met, or was there a mentor, or where did the idea come from?
Well, I think I didn't. I found WeThinkCode. I joined WeThinkCode 2 years into the journey.
Okay.
And my pathway into tech then starts with tech consulting. As a practitioner, being part of build teams,
I see,
coming up with digital strategy and building out a solution. And a big challenge in that was always talent pipelines. It was always, how do you get enough people that are good enough at this thing to help you build? And it becomes an absolute constraint to growth in digitally innovating businesses. Of course, AI is a new disruption, and we can talk about that. But if you roll it back to circa 2012, 2013, everyone who was depending on digital technology to drive innovation and growth in their business was scrambling for talent.
It got even worse now because it's global talent. If you can code in Python, you can code here, America, wherever.
You're a digital nomad. Yeah. Your skill is everywhere, and it's a leveler in that regard. And then, South African universities collectively are producing about 8,000 software engineers every year. Then you've got other people that cross over. They play with tech when they're doing some research work. They're really mathematicians, but they're playing with tech somewhere and they cross in. But core computer science, we're producing about 8,000 a year.
That's a number. And that's actually bigger than I thought.
And it's less than we need. It's bigger than you thought, but less than we need. And so I experienced the talent constraint from a practitioner perspective, because as managing director of ThoughtWorks Africa, we were scrambling, and the fight for talent was insane. We were pulling engineers off delivery to be part of recruiting teams so that we could attract the right talent
Yeah.
and so forth. And it was mad. And so at the back of my mind is like, well, there's got to be another way. We can't all be competing for this scarce resource. Somebody's got to go and be busy with the building of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that made the move into WeThinkCode so natural, because it was something that I understood as a generic across the board. We have a shortage. And then when you zoom into what little supply we do have, we have a diversity challenge.
Sure.
And so a sucker for punishment. I'm like, this is a juicy problem. Let's dive in head first and then find out how much harder it is than I imagined. But yeah, it's been a rewarding journey to get closer to the problem and start to bring that combination of skills together. The one that says, actually, I've been part of building solutions. So I have an understanding of when someone says, I need digital skills talent, what do they need and what do they not need? And when someone says, I'm taking on young talent and I need to onboard them so that they can be effective, I've experienced that firsthand. I've been that person crossing over from accounting and wanting to be helpful and not a burden to everyone. And I've been that person as a senior executive, wanting to make sure that people that are coming in are onboarded well and start to add value.
So tell us about the business. Describe the business to me now as it stands today. And then the next question I'm going to ask you is, tell me about the evolution. Where did it start? So if you see where it is today, and then tell me where it was sort of 10 years ago, whenever, what's happened?
So what it is today is a respected pipeline for quality digital talent, and an understanding that that pipeline is so carefully curated in terms of inclusion, primarily dealing with structural elements of exclusion. There's the obvious ones, socioeconomic. If you don't have money to go to a college that offers IT, you end up not studying it. If you don't have 75% in physics or mathematics, most core colleges are not going to look at you twice. And yet on the build side, we realize that that's not necessary. And then other layers of diversity in there. There's gender, where IT has traditionally been very much a male-dominated field. And then beyond that, as software becomes more pervasive to everything we do, we need people from different fields to cross over. We need accountants helping us understand accounting.
Makes sense. Yeah.
We need doctors in there. We need teachers in there, so that as we build to the need of the domain. And so our model of recruitment, which is aptitude-based, opens it up and democratizes the access. And so we're able to tap into talent in software that would otherwise be overlooked. And so from the demand side looking at us, what they see is a place where you get good talent, but a rich set of humans that have that talent and diversity. Then from the student side, they see an opportunity to study tuition free, which means if I can show up and I can do the work, I'll get a shot to work at this. They study in an environment that's a peer learning environment. So it's not really like Sage on the stage is going to give me the answers. It's I'm going to grapple with some peers and some structured information that's handed to me. And over time, I'm going to build both the skill of building software as well as the skill of learning about software so that I can build more software.
Yeah.
Because our industry changes so fast. It's not like accounting where, balance sheets are still balance sheets 20 years after the first time I ever touched it.
Yeah.
It's fast changing. And so that's where we are now. We are viewed by the market as a reliable pipeline for quality talent, which is embodied in a diversity of amazing human beings with interesting life stories that make them even better creators. And by the supply side, being the student, we're seen as a place that's going to give me a shot, like the Second Chances Academy. So maybe I my matric, but I'm smart and I'm hardworking, and this gives me an opportunity to break into it. I started out, I'm working in a restaurant. I see no way out. I feel a little bit stuck. Who am I going to be if I grow up? Here's an opportunity for me to go there. Or I went into finance and now I want to change track. Here's an opportunity for me to switch career.
So I'd imagine one of your biggest then marketing pieces would be the success stories of these people. Take the person from the worst background and then the best, like the outcome, like the person with the biggest stretch. Like you must have a bunch of those stories.
Oh my God, I live for them. I live for those stories. And I stalk our alumni on LinkedIn just for, personal gratification of seeing how well. There's a young lady, Tsulu, who was orphaned when she was really, really young, and grew up in Tembisa, raised by her grandmother, finishes high school and just, has never thought of software as a career.
Yeah.
Isn't sure, what she's going to go do next. And she's in a taxi. She's just come from an interview. She's dejected. The interview didn't go well. She's in a taxi. A random dude next to her is like, "What's going on? You don't look, you don't look okay." She tells him her story. He's like, "Oh, have you heard of this thing called WeThinkCode?" She's like, "No, I haven't." Goes home, researches it, applies, gets in, is amazing, and now has won awards as, in young women in innovation and technology, is working at MTN, recently just had a baby. But you see this complete switch from a life of personal loss, financial lockout, no way out, what am I going to do next, to accessing this thing that she becomes incredibly passionate about, brings all the resilience and grit that different moments in her life have built in her, pours that in there, and is now like a role model for so many young women that are entering technology. And then last week, there was this video of a drone being launched, and it's a security drone. It turns out it's two guys that were on the WeThinkCode campus that left and started their own business as a software consultancy. Now they're building software for drones in the security industry. This idea that talent is evenly distributed, access to opportunity is not. And if we can open up more opportunity, people aren't looking for handouts. They're looking for a way in to what sometimes feels like an economy closed off by a fortress.
Yeah.
And then once they're in, they just get out the way. And they will create the magic that will generate the economic activity that will create the growth we all
I love that. Yeah, it is exactly the kind of thinking that we need, and I think so much so that I suppose exactly what you're saying, there's limited access, right? So how do you operate? Is it online only or online and campus based, like you were saying? What's the limitation behind the campus? What about the barrier to entry, like costs? What do those look like?
So how we operate is all the training is digitally delivered, but on our campuses. And this is for two reasons. One, because of the demographic that we service, like over 60% of the students on our campus are coming from extreme low income households. I'm talking collective household income of 75,000 rands per annum.
Wow.
And so the access to a computer, access to data, electricity, a quiet room, a like-minded person across the table that I can chat to who has the capacity and time to work with me through the problem isn't always a guarantee. And so campus becomes the place. And because we're a peer learning environment, which means we don't have lecturers, we've got content, it's structured, it's curated, but our students work together to solve problems. We observed, especially during COVID, when we were pushed into a completely remote setup, especially early into the learning curve, 70% of our students have never programmed before they come to WeThinkCode. And so essentially, what am I going to call you to ask you? I know I'm stuck. I can't yet articulate. I don't really know you from a bar of soap. You seem like a nice guy, but hi, it's Nyari and I don't know what I'm doing is such a bar, and it can become an absolute barrier to learning.
Yeah.
And so digitally delivered, but in a contact environment. And now we're playing with hybrid, maybe 3 days in, 2 days out, but mostly in person for the energy, for the social dynamic, for the interaction, and then also for the consistency of infrastructure for students that don't have access. And then we're funded by a combination of partners because our students don't pay a tuition fee, but they have an obligation on graduation to work at least 1 year for one of our funding partners to earn back the tuition that was.
Got you. Yeah.
And then our funding is broken up into corporate partners that are hiring. They pay upfront so that someone can get the education, and then at the end they absorb. And our largest hiring partners would be in the telcos and financial services, who generally are the largest employers of
Sure.
people in our industry. And then we also have philanthropy, so organizations that are looking at livelihoods and jobs and saying, how can we get more people in work? How can we get more people with the kinds of qualifications that open up career pathways? So they'll put money in as well. And increasingly, we are seeing tech vendors paying for us to train firstly in the fundamentals and then in specific skill sets, be it a Google or an Oracle or an SAP, because essentially for them, they're selling their technology to organizations. Those organizations want confidence that they can find talent that can use that tech in the industry, and then we're training. So it creates this nice ecosystem of the people that make the tools, the organizations that use the tools, and the young people with the skills to operate. And so that becomes a nice little
Ecosystem,
that we put together.
So rewarding, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How long have you been doing that? When did you start there? What was I have the date, but I can.
I started
2019.
2019, February 2019. So my tenure was a 7-year whirlwind, went by ever so quickly. And it evolved from when I joined, we had the Johannesburg campus, we had just opened Cape Town, to now we have 7 campuses, Joburg and Cape Town still, but we've got 5 across the TVET pipe.
And how many people are at these?
In total, right now on our campuses are about 620 youth that are studying. And the team itself is about 40 people across the country. So far, we've graduated 1,800 young people.
Sure.
80% of those are employed either by themselves, mostly locally. And some of them have actually started doing gig work internationally.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And where do you want to grow to? Is there an idea to have like 10,000 students, or what is the?
That's my dream. My dream is the biggest spender on education in South Africa is the South African government. Decidedly outspends many countries, definitely on the
In the seaters or in what space?
all the way from basic education, high school, into the TVET colleges. South Africa has 50 TVET colleges. There's about 343 campuses across the country. So almost any city you've driven through, there's a TVET college near the road you're on. And the South African government pours money into this infrastructure, which is an incredible asset. I think it's underutilized because when you start to look at digital technology, on the one hand, you've got the physical infrastructure. On the other hand, you've got the curriculum and the know-how to train at that scale. And currently, most of those skills are sitting in either, your larger universities, so think WITS, UJ, UCT, or in colleges that are private colleges and paid for. What we're able to do is unlock and make that value available across the board, because through a digitized curriculum that's facilitated by our alumni, so we build the timber that trains, which means we'll never be short of it. We're able to actually deliver that at a national scale. So I was very excited to be listening to the SONA and hearing the president talking about digital skills and the government putting money behind that. Not just because we've got the infrastructure, not just that because even beyond WeThinkCode, there are other similar programs. We've got models that can work to do that kind of scale, but because the world needs it. In the same way that South Africa's GBS sector, finance sector is globally renowned for an excellent service offshored from South Africa overseas, I think this is the next big thing. And I think it is a great way to shift from most people on the African continent just being passive consumers of technology from somewhere else to African technologists creating technology and exporting it out. We've got the youth demographic, the largest in the world and growing. We've got the ideas. The cost of the infrastructure is coming down. It's getting cheaper and cheaper to buy a computer. And so all of those things are levelers. AI is making teaching and learning and programming cheaper and easier. And so I think we should be placing big bets on making South Africa a destination for digital skills as well as digital solutions.
I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah. It's such a low-hanging fruit. I mean, it seems almost obvious.
Those good ideas kind of are, really.
Yeah.
Just the will to change it. It's hard. We're struggling with getting the education system to a place where basic education can get literacy right across the board. So it can be intimidating to say, how do we make these big leaps forward if the bread and butter elements historically haven't always gone so well? How do we then transition from that into this other thing? But I think that just calls for courage. And I don't think there's a shortage of that in South Africa. It's been done again and again before. Locally, there are a lot of great consulting companies in South Africa that are offshoring their services. So we've got a lot of local expertise. And in an organization like WeThinkCode, that expertise has just put its arms around us. When you look at our curriculum, we've curated the fundamentals curriculum that takes you from zero, I don't know what programming is, to, okay, I get the basics. But beyond that, we co-create all specialist curriculum with a lot of local consulting companies that are expert in data engineering, expert in blockchain, experts in cloud. And so we've got enough expertise locally. We've got enough young people locally. We've got enough infrastructure nationally. And the global demand for this is there. And so we just need to, sit at the table, join the dots, be incredibly ambitious and persistent about it. If you think of a story like the Springboks going from losing match after match after match, it was a methodical plan that got us all screaming and jumping in Ellis Park. It's not accidental. It's a methodical way of unpacking a talent pool that's already
Yeah.
there.
It's great leadership. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's South African leadership.
Yeah.
It's not leadership from somewhere else necessarily that shifted that. And so
So how do you get in?
for
What are,
success.
what are guys got to do?
What is to get
Besides sit next to the right guy on the
the-
transports, but
quarter friend?
yeah.
So we open up our applications once a year, usually around June. And because it's aptitude-based, so we don't care what you studied before. We don't care about your matric results. The first test is a critical skill thinking one. It's word puzzles, visual puzzles, trying to see how does your brain play with a problem.
Who came up with these tests?
This is a largely open source content where we sat down and we were like, ordinarily when you're testing someone, the ideal is you test them on the thing you want to see how good they are at. So if I want a sprinter for the Olympics, I put everybody at a starting line and I say who gets across the 100-meter line first. But then these are all trained sprinters. So if they've never really sprinted professionally, how do I evaluate who, with the right kind of support and training, can become the best software engineer? And we realized that it's about cognitive ability. So is your cognition the kind of cognition that understands patterns, that can deal with a problem when the computer is screaming at you and refusing to do what you think you told it to do? Are you going to, throw the computer out the window? Or are you going to sit down, take a deep breath, start again? So do you have that kind of grit and persistence with a problem? Can you collaborate? When you arrive with half the picture, do you have the communication skills, the team spirit skills that enable you to get the answer from across the table? And that's what we evaluate for. What we realized is usually entrance tests become about a proxy. They are about if Nyari, when she was in high school, played hockey, then we believe she knows how to work in a team. If she played hockey and did public speaking at the same time, we suspect she can multitask. And if she also passed her exams, then we think maybe she's smart. So this combination of proxies is the reason why someone will hire me.
Yeah.
But then when you start to look at South Africa broadly and you look at the socioeconomic landscape, you realize that we're using a limited set of proxies to identify potential competence.
Ones that not everyone has access to. Yeah.
Yes. And so if you go back to that story about Sulu, this is a young woman who's demonstrated resilience off a hockey field. I argue that her resilience was dramatically way ahead of mine in a hockey match. But for some reason, that's not what we're looking for on a CV. It's like, I basically raised my siblings at the age of 11. I'm like, oh my God, Queen, take over. I'm psyched. And so we really need to look closer at that and say, yes, proxies are good, but sometimes where the problem arises is if one proxy is true, we then forget it's a proxy. We then forget that maths is a good proxy for logic, but it's not the only indicator of logic. Passing university is a proxy for, in spite of many hangovers, you managed to lift your head up and write an exam and pass. Maybe that's grit. But there's a lot of other grit going on in a country like South Africa that we should be asking those questions, going to the places where it's being demonstrated, recruiting from there, and we'll be better for it.
I think it's such a great story.
Thank you.
I love it. Well, I mean, from our perspective, we sort of very passionate about education. So it's to this space exactly. We try and find the people who really like pushing despite whatever going on. They're actually pushing to get somewhere. But an interesting thing that you raised now, just thinking about it, despite the fact that you might be the 80%, 90% student, that doesn't mean anything about your success going forward. And actually, often you see the opposite true, unless it's sort of maths. I think maths is quite a good one to pull most people through, But that success at school doesn't necessarily translate to success outside.
Yeah.
And success outside, I mean, you could take whoever, not necessarily whoever, but you could take with the right sort of ideas and the right way of thinking, you could take them and mold them into something much better. So it's such an interesting thing that you sort of, I suppose you haven't happened upon it. You guys have thought about it quite a lot because this is the space that you're in.
But I think it's also about those of us that have experienced some level of success being honest about when you reflect on your life and you look at any achievement, and I'm not talking monumental like you're the richest person alive or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you're honest with yourself about what enabled you to do it, you suddenly realize that, oh, I could have quit. I persevered. So that means I ran out of all the knowledge in all the textbooks I read and I stayed at it.
Yeah.
And then I got through. And then you remember there was this and that other person who were there with me. And that enabled us to, among us collectively, was how we, figured it out. So when you start to reflect on it that way, the way you can I say, judge other people,
Yeah.
changes because you're being more honest about, was it really just the certificate on the wall that got me here, or was it a lot more? And then you look out and you're like, oh, a lot of other people have this. But one of the things that excites me about education in general is, I think it's UNESCO had an estimate that for Africa to achieve universal secondary education, we need something like 17 million teachers across the continent. Those are those numbers where, is it true, is it not true? Let's just say we need a lot. And let's just say we don't have enough. And let's just say language barriers make it hard to scale. We're now sitting in an age where technology can solve those problems, where we can start to look at teachers differently. When I remember my teachers growing up, I maybe remember them more as being supportive, being guides, being strict disciplinarians that maybe helped me to get my act together, and less of what exactly they said in the algebra lesson. And so we're now getting to a place where technology, AI in particular, can enable a level of hyper-personalization at a commoditized and scaled level so that young people can be engaged in learning in a format that interests them. So if you're getting bored and you like football, can we start to create football analogies so that you and I are sitting next to each other and I'm watching football, which I love, as the way to understand mathematics, and then you're watching, I don't know, ballet.
Yeah.
That's what interests you. And the teacher is there helping us grow as humans.
Yeah.
Because the tech stuff is now on the digital platform. And that's a crazy unlock because we now don't need to figure out how to train up enough teachers to quickly get deployed across the country at the right level of competence to train all our young people so that we've got a pipeline of talent. We can now say with the teachers we have, the mandate is now a little bit different. And we're using South African techies to go into South African contexts, using South African languages to train up our young people so that over the next 10, 20, 30 years, they can be game changers in our economy. And stuff like that excites me.
And what's the sort of mandate of the teachers? Are they called teachers and what are they? Trainers, teachers? Facilitators.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're simply there to be involved. So the content is delivered digitally.
Yes.
And then they're there to be involved. Someone's got a question. They're there. They're kind of.
So we're very data driven.
Yeah.
So we are tracking so many different parameters about how you're interacting. When did you submit your work? How many times did you submit it to get it right? And so forth. So we're tracking that data to see, is there a concentration of struggle around a particular concept or area? And the facilitators are creating workshops around that. They're also generally introducing new topics, kind of like a launch. Because sometimes when you're learning something really new, it can be a bit of a paradigm shift in your head, and it can be hard to just read it off a textbook or just watch a video on YouTube.
Sure.
So they're kind of opening up the content. But their role is largely Socratic, that frustrating way of supporting someone where you're like, I think you've got the answers. So you ask me your question and I'm like, what do you think? And then in tech, we often refer to it as rubber ducking.
Yeah.
That sometimes you just need to say it out loud to a rubber duck. And just by
Yes.
getting it out of your head, suddenly
Yeah.
the answer comes back
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
But it's more trying to use community to support a level of self-sufficiency in self-directed learning.
Gotcha.
And so that's the role of the
So there
facilitator.
is someone there who it does actually have the knowledge, but they try and get you to. I love it. It's such a new style of teaching. It's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, I could have done a lot better if that was around when I was around at varsity.
And we have a lot of people that have dropped out of university because they were struggling, come into WeThinkCode and fly. And it's literally just a difference in the learning format.
Methodology. Yeah,
Which is, we've also just got to accept that, like 55 to 60 million people, it's statistically an impossibility that we all learn the same way.
100%.
So you've got to have different ways of enabling people to, to find their destiny and their potential. So like I said, I'm an accountant. I'm a trained accountant. As a CA, I trained in Zim when you could join the accounting firm straight out of high school, which is what I did. So I actually learned accounting in this way. I learned accounting, yes, from a textbook because I had exams at intervals and I was studying with UNISA, but mostly from my peers and people who were just like 1 year, 2 years ahead of me that I would ask questions. So I think it's actually a very traditional age-old way of learning. Think of it as apprenticeship. You've got some level of material that you read, and then you're given real projects that you apply it to. None of us would hire a plumber because they, have a certificate of plumbing. Most of us hire a plumber because our neighbor said this plumber's a really good plumber.
Yeah.
They have done some plumbing. Um, oh, yeah,
They plumb.
very plumb. And essentially, that's the model, which is you could call it blue collar or artisanal way of teaching or learning, is where we borrowed a lot of that material. And so I think for a lot of industries, it applies. Maybe not brain surgery so much, because I don't want you experimenting on my little brain if
Yeah.
you haven't tried it on a cadaver. But conceptually, I think it's got widespread application and is maybe more common than we realize. That, I mean, when you look at Germany, I think they have a 70-30 ratio. 70% of their workforce comes from vocational training and 30% from university.
Our industry is actually very similar to that. There's not a lot of content you can find on what we do.
Yeah.
It's limited, and maybe you're starting to get a little bit more on maybe social media, but there's no content. There's nothing you can actually go into.
Yeah.
So it's the same. You learn it from your peers, from the seniors, and then you'll find that the trajectory of that person is directly correlated to the positioning of themselves to the top people.
Mm-hmm.
If they can't position themselves next to top people and they position themselves on the bottom end,
changes your trajectory.
Yeah.
I was recently interviewing. I have a very exciting life in this regard. I really constantly just get to talk to young people and hear how their lives have changed. But we had a startup that came through that was looking for about 10 young people. And they asked if I could screen for people who would be able to operate in a startup. So needed to be a little bit more independent than the average person, a little bit more mature, because they're very early and they don't have an army of people to supervise. And the one young lady was asking me for my advice on whether to go and work in a startup or a large corporate. And, I was saying, well, there's no right answer. But I can definitely say that in my career, working in smaller organizations taught me how to relate to the people that make decisions and help me understand their language, help me to understand how to use what little access I might have in the beginning to earn their trust so that I have more access to them. Once you sit next to someone who's making decisions, no matter how big or how small the organization, I think your view shifts from a very myopic, I want to do this, I need this, to like, well, this organization or this machine is going in that direction. How can I be part of contributing to that outcome? And what's this person to the left and that person to the right doing to enable it collectively?
Yeah.
And so I encourage people, if you can have the opportunity at some point, either being part of a very small team where you've got access to the leader, or being part of a very small organization, is just, it's magic in terms of learning.
Actually, really insightful perspective.
Yeah.
Because I think that's absolutely correct. That the flatter an organization is, the less sort of scaled up it is, that you just have this access to the people who are going to change your life. Yeah.
And then you change theirs. I think WeThinkCode is, we recruit 65% of our staff is WeThinkCode alumni, because I mean, we believe that if we're telling everybody that they're good, the best way to demonstrate it is by running off of that actual fuel. The benefit of just young, fresh eyes, before you're jaded, before you're too scared to make mistakes, is the right kind of tension in an organization. Because the answer isn't one or the other. I think it comes from the rubbing against each other. And I love flat structures. I think I would struggle if I ever went back into a hierarchy. And every now and again when I'm consulting and I end up in a hierarchical space, I literally feel my little body shrink. You think I'm going to die.
Yeah. And what's next for you? You sit as the executive chair of the board here. What are you involved in various different things? What are you doing at the moment?
So I guess I've been thinking of my life in stages, right? So the first stage was building me to become a professional who can contribute something. The WeThinkCode phase has been building others so that they can, find a way. Now I'm interested in building products again, and in building products specifically with WeThinkCode alum, and started working. There's some small projects that I'm doing with a team of alum. We were building some solutions for some corporate partners in financial services, and trying to just create more of those scenarios where I can sit at the center of circles with people that have graduated out of WeThinkCode and get creative juices again. It's a little bit different building a business versus like building a product, and maybe the product becomes a business. But so getting very close to the software again.
And do all guys, the sort of the alumni, and even the guys in the campus, do they work on actual products? Like, does the bank come and say, we would like to build out X, Y, Z, and then they actually work on that.
Absolutely. And especially in their internships. And we do hackathons where they give us a puzzle that's on their side of the fence, and we give it to our students to say, okay, what do you think? Build something. Last year we were working with Meta AI, and we actually had students build solutions for healthcare. How do you start to come up with solutions for the congestion at public hospitals, and what are the AI solutions that can aid this? What's causing it? How do you overcome language barriers when people are needing to communicate? So we get our students to build those kinds of things. And I think it's so necessary, because one of the things that happens when you're in school is you're trained in what we call greenfields. I'll say to you, build me a mobile app for scheduling, and you have a blank page and you build it like you like. What really happens in the real world is not only are you building an app for scheduling, you're building it for real humans that have all sorts of quirks.
Yeah.
So your ideas might be brilliant for you, but the moment Nyari holds your app, it stops working because she's pressing all the wrong buttons compared to how you designed it. The next thing that happens, usually earlier in your career, you are given an existing code base and something on it needs to change. It's not fast enough. It needs a new feature. Regulation has changed and we need to modify it. And a lot of young people struggle with that shift of learning on a blank page to actually applying in a real world context.
Yes. Yeah.
So we've got a module in the training that we call brownfields, where we give them a pre-existing code base, preferably a really messy one.
Yeah.
And then say, now add this. And we make sure that there isn't enough time for you to build the whole thing from scratch.
Yeah.
So you've got to leverage some of that legacy and figure out how to navigate.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the most appreciated by our hiring partners, because it teaches how the world of work really works, which is more additive often than it is ground up.
Yeah, we had exactly this problem yesterday. We built out something, and it was like a FICA submission form, very simple, and it works perfectly. So if you test it, and you're the one who built it, or you're the one who was close to the person who built it, it works perfectly. But why are the clients complaining that it doesn't work?
Yeah.
Well, it's because they're not doing exactly what it's supposed to do, And this is the problem, is that actually got to test it to break it. Like, what happens if you don't submit your FICA?
Yeah.
Is it going to say yes? It's going to say no? Like, it's going to error?
Yeah. What happens if you put a number in a field that clearly is for a word, which fishing humans love to do?
Yeah, amazing. Okay, awesome. It's been great chatting to you. Fascinating. You've had a fascinating career so far. I mean, you're clearly very passionate about it, and obviously your mind's working overtime. So
sadly, my sleep score is not doing so good. But
don't wear that thing up. Don't. It's terrible. I like you. You're like, oh, I feel fantastic. Oh no, I actually feel terrible. Yeah. Oh, my battery's run down. Yeah.
My body battery.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
Really enjoyed the conversation.
So yeah, me too.
Right.
Ashmita, welcome, the current CEO. So it's been so interesting chatting now, like obviously learning about, where we think code came from, and, how it's grown up and how many people are in the campuses. And so we've spoken about so much about the business. It's like really exciting, As a business, we love the education aspect of the market. I personally, and I think this business feels like that's the real way forward in this country, is education. And I think it's such a low-hanging fruit to just go for an internationally in-demand skill. So, your business plays directly into this, which is like really exciting. But interestingly, looking at your CV, you actually come from a far more social background, which is effectively what this is solving, but this is now a tech business.
Yeah.
So how did the two meet, and how did you find one another, and how did you start there, and what's your background?
Sure. My background starts way before that.
Okay.
And I actually started in, social technically because of where I came from. I think I understand the marginalized community because I grew up in it. And I spent my first part of my professional career actually in corporate. Strangely enough, I was in finance, and I took many detours to get to where I am today. I built lots of businesses, always somehow with the social element in play, before and after the digital curve kind of came in. And the activism or the work that I did with the Women for Change, as an example, came on the path to where I am today. But I think most importantly on this journey has been the fact that it isn't separable. And when you look at where I am today and how it intersects with everything that I've done, I think it's just something that has now created what would be a multiplier to all the work that we had done
Sure.
before. So if I go back to Women for Change, which was a social movement, and the work that I did there as strategic advisor, we were only able to do what we were able to do because of having a digital organization of the entire movement. If you weren't online, you were not participating in your civil right that you have,
Yeah.
constitutional right, which is really interesting because there's an entire group that's shut out and not able to be a part of that. So I think that this seems to be like the perfect point in everything that I've done, from building businesses, from collecting financial, on that financial journey, the social journey. And I built my own tech as well. And it all just came together and it was like, okay, we need to be here. So yeah, this is how I landed up here, was the fact that it just seemed like the perfect next step to really take everything that I knew and use this to propel everything that we are doing.
And how did you find out about it? Did you find out about the business and apply, or was there a role available, or did you meet one another and then?
I was actually headhunted for the position. So I knew WeThinkCode because I did some work before I joined, before actually getting contacted by them. I was at the place called the Safe Hub, and the Safe Hub is basically social and economic infrastructure in townships. We built in 14 townships, and WeThinkCode was a program partner, or like just at one of the sites. And it was something that was always really, really top of mind for me to say, why aren't we working more closely with this brand and what they are doing, because of the equity pathway they were creating to technology. And when I heard that this position was here and I was able to come in and follow Nyari and everything that she had built, I was like, yes, I'm coming. It just seemed like it was the most divine moment in my entire career. So yeah, the knock came and I answered.
Amazing. Yeah, you can see, obviously, immediately just talking to her, she's bursting with ideas and energy. And
Yeah.
it's power there, yeah.
Yeah.
So really exciting working with a person like
Yeah.
that. Where are you sitting at the moment? Where do I spoke to her about where it came from, where we are today. What I'm interested in now is where we are today, where you're going.
Yeah. So, speaking to her, you can see that there's incredible foundation. It's a firm foundation, a formidable team, and I'm not interested in changing anything that's working. So it's about how do we take what we've already done so well and how do we now optimize that and make it even better. So the reality is that when you have a firm foundation, you can diversify and you can try new things without, detracting from core. And we never should, because the academy is incredible and is doing something that is so important for the entire African landscape, is creating that skill. So it really is about how do we take this, use that foundation, and how do we now build out things that are meaningful. So there's 4 specific things that I'm super excited about. And I told her I'm not going to say anything controversial. So these are
4 things I'm excited about, and they have nothing to do with Rethink.
So the 4 things, and I think Nyari and I have been talking lots and lots in the team, and it's all just really, one of it isn't, and the other 3 are really aspirational, that how we see it playing out. So I'll give you the 4 and I'll unpack it a bit. So the first one is really the schools of specialization. I'm sure you guys chatted about that in her earlier conversation with you, and looking at the decentralization and localization of the campuses. So how do we bring the campuses closer to the young people that need to access it? And then it's all about ecosystem convening. So how do we actually kind of like coordinate the sector, because it's all over the place? And the last thing would be, how do we create entrepreneurship tracks which result in exportable skills? So starting with the fact that the schools of specialization, we are seeing that there's a demand in the market. But now how do we go after the market from different angles at different stages? And how do we bring our young people into, responding to demand that's there? So creating those specialization tracks, blockchain, AI, like we chatted about when we had our little break, and cybersecurity, all the things that's top of mind. And how do we get our young people, our students, ready and postured for the market, that they are not just trying to enter the market at a entry level, but they are actually coming into the market and they are making a real impact. And they are able to demand a proper pay point for that. So that's one of it. The decentralization model is very exciting because we're currently now across 5 TVET campuses together with our 2 main campuses. The intention is to continue to expand that. And speaking about, like I mentioned, the Safe Hub earlier, and looking at in-community partners that are like that, to see how we...
When you say Safe Hub,
So the Safe Hub is a massive infrastructure that's built to create programming. They've got a massive football field. and they use sport as to create a safe space for young people to come in. So they are deep in townships, rural and the like. And they basically, people come in, they feel safe. And when people are feeling safe, people are willing to learn and there's less apprehension.
Sure.
So we are trying to partner with community partners, so deeply entrenched, where there's trust built, where you don't have to like make someone feel like they're worthy of being in the room, because there's a lot of fear when it comes to let's try something new. And how can we bring you into a different, how do we talk digital? How do we do all of those things? And how do we fast track you to market? Now we are partnering with these partners, bringing these young people in, and we are able to do it on their doorstep.
So what limits you? What limits the growth of your business?
Right now, the manner in which the business is structured is that we are a nonprofit and we are relying on donor funding, but we are moving from this whole concept of being CSI, give us your donations, to showing you that, because we really are, we are adding value. We are injecting an entire untapped market supply into the market that wasn't there before. We're doing the mining of these young people, preparing them for market and deploying them. And not just deploying them for the sake of saying, okay, you have something that needs to be done. We are deploying them and we're moving the country forward, because we are creating a labor force that's actually then comparable, if not ahead, because of the fact that we are able to price point a bit lower than global markets, to say, let's export our young people to service your needs.
Yeah.
So I think the thing that's a major inhibitor is the fact that it's coming back to earlier about the ecosystem convening. It really is about saying this ecosystem of all the different players that sit around the table, we are all trying to go after the same thing, right? We all want to break open that economic corridor for a young person, and we all have the same goal. So how do we put our effort together to actually make that meaningful, in the sense that don't look at us as we need your CSI, we don't need your enterprise development. Come to us and let's sit down and let's talk about this. Let's look at placement fees. Let's look at different revenue generation models. It's something that
I keep thinking of like a profit share type of model,
Yeah,
you know, like that person massively increases in their earning potential.
Yeah.
You know,
And
must be.
there must be something there. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think this whole, and you come to it because one of the things I want you to unpack in this ecosystem model is that when the young person, because that entire ecosystem is built around the young person, when that young person gets to the end, it shouldn't be just I'm entering the economy, I'm getting placed in a job, or I'm starting a business and then we say bye-bye. But how do we help that become a circular economy? How does that person start to potentially pay back, or how do they interrupt something or create community trusts that are ultimately creating another pathway for a young person? But more importantly, how do we help them sit in a business? So I'll give you an example. Like a call center. How do we put young people into what looks like a call center setup, but actually they are their own businesses? So they are sharing in equity, they are earning, but we are going as a WeThinkCode umbrella and talking to foreign markets to say, come, bring your needs here. And we are working together with the likes of Bapesa and other call centers, the GBS partners, to see if that is something that can actually.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I think Kate asked an interesting question earlier. Is like, you know, when you talk about we think code, are there other aspects that you go, we think accounting, we think maths, we think art, whatever it is? Is there like a bigger play potentially?
I think what's important is that the WeThinkCode as a digital arm is not an industry. You know, I think tech overarches all those sectors that
yeah.
you just spoke about. So I think that in the future, there's definitely an opportunity for us to see how do we overlay that without detracting from the core. Coming back to the fact that, you know, if we look at different businesses at different stages, not everybody's interested in getting AI into their business. If you think about a small business that's like really just going day to day.
But I think everyone's interested, but no one knows what that actually means.
Yeah, but then you're going to find the guy who's probably really old. He's got a business. He's like, I don't want to use AI. I don't want to learn this thing, because we've seen it in certain spaces, right? But that guy may just have some value in optimizing a database, you know, putting his customers into an Excel spreadsheet that could do certain things for him that it wasn't doing before. So I think coming back to WeThink all these different verticals, it will be really powerful to see how we can actually show people that, you know, participating in the digital economy doesn't mean that you have to do one extreme over the other, but there's different entry points, and we have the kind of young people that can be deployed into multiple sectors to be able to do that. But yeah, I think that's the manner in which we will actually find ourselves in different verticals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And right now, I mean, one of the big constraints for you is 652. What was the number?
604.
604. Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's currently active.
Yeah,
614,
currently
that's currently
600.
active.
Yes. So I mean that's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
You know, how long are they there every day? Is it all day? Are they there in the morning?
Yeah. So the way it's structured is what's really important about the way we teach in this academy is that we want to make sure that when you leave after your 16 months in the academy, you leave ready for the economy. You're not just getting a crash course at the end on. Now you work ready. Okay, bye. The point is that you come in and you actually come to work every day. So it's like coming in the morning, so you spend a full day, you are at your desk, you are peer collaborating, you're doing what you need to do, but you're at the academy every day.
Sure.
And you are actually participating in it, like with the mindset of I've got to show up, I've got to participate, and there's that. It comes down to you actually making sure that you meet all your milestones.
Yeah. It's an interesting point that you show up for a work day, you're there from 8 to 5 because, yeah, I mean, you're at school, you go till what, 2 o'clock or something like this. You know, you're not really ready for that 5 o'clock day. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I'm still ready for that day, but anyway, but it's it's just a completely different way of sort of thinking about it. We were talking also about AI. What I'm interested in is AI and how this impacts the tech world. You know, looking at some of the tech that we build, we have a piece of technology that we build here and we've been building for a long time, and it's, it never ends. It's always just something new and an improvement and a this and a that.
It probably got improved while we were talking.
100%, yeah, or not. So, but these, the lovely 2 week sprints, 2 weeks. When's it already? 2 weeks. Okay. Anyway, but it's with a sort of coupling of AI.
Yeah.
And you've got sort of ChatGPT Codex, and you've got this and that, and so many different. Do you think it's going to speed up, take over, improve? What's going to happen to the industry? What are people dealing with now all of a sudden? Do you need to learn ChatGPT, or do you need to learn how to code fundamentally and then get sped up by ChatGPT? Where do you see that going?
Okay, so I think it depends who you are, right? So if you think about coding from the core perspective, I think it's going to. I've heard clients say to us over the past 6 weeks that I've been here, I want to say months since it hasn't been, that I don't want our interns to code. I don't want them to use AI. I want them to learn how to code and use AI to check their code. Because the one thing that you need is to be able to understand what the AI is giving back to you, especially from a coding perspective. So that's one side of things. And I suppose there's 2 different views on that, because then AI is enabling coding to be much quicker. I was in a session last week with a group of different people, not just digital, but there was a guy in there saying, no code, low code, no code, low code. And he was super excited about how he's building all these apps this way. And I just came down and said, hi, I'm the CEO of WeThinkCode, where we actually put physical young people into the economy to actually do this. And I think it comes down to, if you look at it from a South African context, we are trying to solve multiple problems. While we're trying to chase efficiency, we also have a huge unemployment crisis. We have a serious problem in our economy. So I think we need to find a good balance between that to say, how do we posture the market to say, here are skilled young people and they can actually make things better using AI as opposed to replacing it. And it comes down to an ethical discussion that we need to have, a moral discussion that we need to have around it. So there's that. And I mean, things are moving very fast. So we also can't be reactive. Every time something's being released, we get super excited. We use it, we drop someone, and it's like, oh, okay, let's get.
Oh, well, we crashed the whole system the other day trying to get clever here. We're like, just do this little piece for us, and it builds the whole thing. Fantastic. And then didn't back up, and then uploaded, published, and we had to go back a week. So it was painful, but that's what happens. Yeah.
And I think there's something that we have that's just really beautiful as South Africans. I'm specifically saying this because I was talking about, the BPO and exporting are quite empathetic, and people are, human beings are. And I think that mixing that empathy with the power of AI, it's not meant to replace people, but it's going to replace people who are not using AI. So how do we find that healthy mix? And my view is, because I've got a very social view on the matter as well. So that's why my view is balanced. And there's a reason why I came to the academy, because I believe that these young people are the future. There's a reason why I believe we should be convening ecosystems, even though we're not the biggest player, because we are actually taking the time to bring the young people, upskill them, because we need the people who are going to make the systems. So we can rely on tech to do that for us and use low code, no code. But at the end of the day, you're going to need someone to interpret your code, because you don't even know if your low code, no code is feeding something to some big machine somewhere. and the data, you are breaching 10 different laws because you got no cybersecurity.
Yes.
Then you're calling me and saying, hi, do you have anyone in the cybersecurity elective that I can hire?
Yeah.
Because I'm scared I might go to jail.
Yeah.
So it's, it's give or take, and it's a fact of us being responsible and not being reactive and saying what is sustainable, especially within the context that
Sure.
we are living in.
Sure.
Yeah.
And okay, so then going to the socialism aspect or being or that social background,
Yeah.
do you not think that there's a handoff between, like, take the Netherlands, for example, right? It's a capitalist economy, but it's also a very socialist economy. It's these two things. It uses the capitalism to drive the socialism, and it's almost, this seems like the pairing of what you're trying to do here, because you need the capital to drive the social aspect. Don't you think they marry nicely if they play together, I think, or do you think it's an extreme on the one side or an extreme on the other side?
I think we've got to take what is available to us, right? And we need to see where we need to take stock, and we need to start with where are things sitting? Where are the levers that we need to pull? And I think that it's not about just either or. And I think it's about the fact that a re-education that needs to take place, because let me answer this question with an actual example, is that we're seeing that in corporates, the manner in which a corporate is set up, they want a specific qualification.
Yes.
But the reality is that we are moving so quickly that the answer to most things is, how do we educate for market readiness? And how do we then say, hey, corporate, hey, bureaucracy, look here, you don't need to have a specific qualification and this degree on the wall.
Well, that's what I love with the way that you choose the people who get in.
Yeah, right?
It's a great methodology,
Extremely inclusive to
Yeah.
say we're not going to judge you on anything that you've done before. Like, I've got an honors in accounting. That thing is still in that circular thing they gave me during my grad. I value education, but at the end of the day, it's about demonstratable value. So how do we make the people that can actually fund this? And by fund that, I mean direct your spend, commercial spend. How do you transact with us in a meaningful eye-to-eye? How do we sit at tables and we're not that CSI partner? But you look at us and say you're doing something that none of us are willing to actually do or take the time to do. It's not a social matter. That's the thing, right? Because the issue is that whenever it comes to marginalized communities, whenever it comes to inclusivity, like you just mentioned, the manner in which we assess people and bring them in does not discriminate. But the moment you start doing that, it feels like it becomes a social matter. It's not a social matter. Whether it's GBV, whether it's when we're looking at education, the moment you look at people that are shut out the system, that's not charity. We need to rethink the way the system works. So that's my very safe answer, is that we need to create a re-education around the people that are sitting with the buying power and get them to realize that they are buying value. They are not helping some poor kid get through, because that's just untapped talent that was sitting there that no one took the time to actually see, because it's evenly distributed.
I agree with this because, as an employer,
Yep.
you look really hard to find exactly what you want. And there's unemployment, but there's not there are not a lot of employable people,
Yes.
put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got 100 people, all unemployed, but only 10 of those people employable. So you've got to create more employable people. You just got more opportunity, because then maybe of these 10 people who are employable, you only like 2.
Yeah.
Why don't you could have 10 if you had 100 employable people. So I think that's effectively what you're trying to drive at, right?
Yeah. So let's just move to a more value-oriented system, as opposed to this, okay, we're helping people get by, and let's just find a way to marry opportunity and supply and demand. It's pretty much a marketplace. You can just look at it that way.
But, there's a mentality of, if people don't pay for something, then, they don't value it. It's about getting that right. You've got to attach a value to it.
Correct.
It's got to be something that's,
Which is where the pivot is coming from now, is to really say, how do we create these revenue streams to say, because we believe in the talents that we are creating. And sometimes we all have imposter syndrome. We've got to check ourselves and say, why are we doing this? Because we are thinking about it from a social aspect. And I think that's one of the things I really want to focus on, is to say, how do we change our minds about how we see ourselves in these conversations? And how do we go to market saying, putting our value on the table, and let's go with a commercial proposition.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point of view, and I think like largely like just looking at. I mean, I'm going to go through it. So we got founder of Party for Change, okay, COO of Youth Employment Services, founder of Refresh Africa, strategic advisor to Women for Change, managing director of Reza Ventures, and founder of Swapvend. Swapvend sounds like a fintech. Is it?
Created a digital taxi that digitized barter
Ooh, that's interesting.
because we all have value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like that. Yeah, there's so many things, that you think about the way that people buy and transact, and I mean, tech solves a lot of these issues, but there's so much at the moment. It's just kind of like overwhelming. But
Yeah. I've been doing campus tours because I'm going to visit all the young people, and it's interesting. First, I was scared because, young people can really drag you if you're not cool enough.
yeah,
I want to say that no one dragged me. And there were some interesting questions. But the recurring question in every room was, tell me, what do you see as success for us, And I'm fresh, fresh in the door. And I said, I think success looks like solving real life problems and using tech to do that. Because you can have a fancy tech stack, but then it's not really doing anything. And coming back to the South African context, how do you create solutions that help somebody within the digital space, but something they can use to even help them in their real life?
yeah,
Because then you're really bridging things, and then you're really creating an equitable environment. You're not leaving anyone behind. So my view will always stand on the fact that we need to take everyone with us. And I think there's a space for everybody to actually participate in the digital economy. It's just about where
you fit in.
where you fit in and how we organize everyone. I'm sorry for keep making ourselves a convener, but how does someone take a step back and say there's a place for everyone?
Yeah.
And let's get everybody in, and let's just
Sure. Imagine where we'd be as a company. As I always say, country should be operating like a company, but as a country, if we had like 10 to 15% unemployment, bang.
I don't even know what that would look like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, when I was at YES as well, the Youth Employment Services, I had the front row seat to that. And I mean, that entire mechanism, it was a PPP, private-public partnership. And I reported to a board of CEOs from the private sector. And it was interesting. I was so privileged to be sitting around a table. It was talking about the social issue. It's not a social issue, but it was interesting to see how, we pivoted from a public sector problem into a private sector boardroom, and how the minds went, and what they were asking me to do when it came to, let's build this budget, let's look at this, optimization plan, and what do things really cost. And when you're sitting around the table, it makes you realize that you need every single point of view. Hence the ecosystem, hence bringing all the correct parties to the table, because that perspective is valuable. And I don't like to subscribe to problems. That's why I try to build so many things in my life and solve so many things. But how do we take that and turn it into an opportunity? So if the time is now for WeThinkCode to be that convener, and I hope everyone who's watching this is hearing this because I'm coming to knock on your door. But if we can convene it, it's not about getting the badge of honor because you're calling the round table. But how about just coming in, let's set aside our personal pursuits and say, how do we take this country? We are sitting with value beyond. When you have things, when you're in a circumstance like South Africa is, people are hustling to solve problems. And that hustle mentality to say, I'm not going to look at things in the general way that a textbook is telling me to look at it. I'm going to figure this out. Take that, you use the tech as a multiplier, and you're reaching people far and wide, and there you are. I'm not sure if Nyari mentioned it earlier, but the goal is to move from consuming the tech to creating the tech.
Yes, you did.
And the only way you're going to get there is if that we have organized efforts, if we take our eyes off ourselves and look at the young people. They are there and they are waiting to service the entire world. And that's how you put Africa on the map, is that we just come together for the right purpose.
Couldn't agree more. I'm going to leave it there.
Should I drop the mic?